I've got a mock I want to show you, and I'm pretty happy with it. It's not complete. It's actually a work in progress, very far from being complete, but I am happy with the progress I've made on it so far for a couple of reasons. So this is something I've hinted at before on the channel, and it was all inspired by, oddly enough, something quite small, and yet what I'm going to show you, a vehicle and something else, we'll get to it, is a lot larger than this. What is special about this? Well, this is the Thornax. This is the projectile from the final year of Bionicle, and I quite love it because it implies a lot. First off, it is backwards compatible with the Zammer launcher if you want to use it with that, but it means Zammer are also compatible with the launcher for the Thornax. Love that cross compatibility. And it launches with good force, but it sort of bounces around unpredictably thanks to these rubber spikes, right? It's a really fantastic yet simple and easy to understand design. However, it implies something else too, because the Thornax don't exist in the story as projectiles, at least not originally, right? They're fruit, as far as I know. And so it makes me think that if Glatorian, if a Gory interact with this fruit, other things might too, right? Animals. And so this actually inspired the idea for the Stradle Beast. Now, I've talked about the Stradle Beast in previous videos. In fact, even came up with the design for a head that I liked the shaping of, but I wasn't super happy with how it performed. And this one I haven't even tested the performance of, but I have the idea down. Can I show you this very quickly? This right here, at least from where it stands right now, yeah, it's only got 3 arms at the moment, but this is my start for the Stradle Beast. I'm very happy with it. It's sort of a gorilla stature on the body, but also like an elephant-inspired front as well. And there's a few reasons for that. And it even has a function built in, which we'll talk about here in a moment. But the main thing here is these tusks. Now, I don't know that they're going to be these pieces. Obviously, I don't think they would be white and red. It doesn't really match the color scheme. But the point still stands, right, that what this is trying to do ultimately is funnel these towards the center of the mouth or wherever it needs to go. Point is, this is just the Rahi, but I mentioned that this is a vehicle, right? Well, that's why it's called the Stradle Beast specifically. So 2009 was quite special in that it gave us a lot of really unique designs for vehicles, and one of those vehicles, maybe less unique than some of the others, but still really sort of in tune with the atmosphere of Bar Magna, was one called the Baroness, don't know how it's pronounced. Point being, though, that it is essentially a horse-drawn carriage, right? It is a Rahi-pulled vehicle, and I really like that. It's the first vehicle that we got from Bionicle that I'm aware of, outside of playsets, that is actually pulled by a Rahi, that interacts with a Rahi in some way. And so that's what the Stradle Beast does, but it's different, because the Stradle Beast doesn't pull the vehicle. In fact, it's kind of the opposite. I'm going to show you something very quickly here on Paint. This is the overall stature that I came up with yesterday for the Beast before designing the actual build itself. And what I really enjoy about this is that the straddle car goes directly over top it. Now, this is just the frame here. This is not all the other stuff that goes with it. But you'll notice one thing very important, and that is the fact that the feet are no longer on the ground here, right? The car is carrying the Rahi, which I think is a really interesting subversion on this idea, but it's obviously not the most unique thing in the world. Moving on, what is the function of the vehicle itself? What would be the point of strapping a vehicle to carry around a Rahi if that did not also have a function? Which is where the function of the vehicle comes in. It's a double catapult. So here's where the function of the Rahi, the beast, and the car fit together, interact. So the idea is, if you're somebody that's ever played the Bionicle Thornax game, is just what I'm going to call it, or Glatorian game, whatever, then you know that chasing around one Thornax is easy enough. They don't shoot terribly far unless you put a lot of force behind them. They bounce around a few times and then they stop, and ultimately that works out. But what if you shoot 2 or 3 or 4, and they all kind of bounce around different directions? After a while, it gets a bit clunky to chase them down. Which made me think, well, what about those little like Lego vacuum things, right? Where you can just kind of like roll it over and it picks up all the bricks or whatever, but instead of a vacuum, obviously, a build that picks up these specifically. That'd be a lot of fun to play around with, but how do we work it into the story? So my thought was, you have a Rahi with tusks or some horns, whatever the case may be, whatever appendage you want them to be, that comes around and scoops up the Thornax off the ground, sort of funnels them into a central location, and then flings them back, right? Which leads me back to the Stradle Beast itself. It has a simple function on it. Right now it's not connected to anything, but where you can just press up on a little bit of a lever and it flicks its head back, right? Now, obviously, that would flick with a pretty decent amount of force, so those Thornax are going to go flying backwards. But the idea is that the Thornax flip backward, they sort of roll down the back of the creature, and then divide like water on a rooftop between the left and right side of the vehicle, falling into ultimately a catapult basket. And I like the idea of a catapult because catapults don't really discriminate against the shape of whatever object is in the basket, right? Which makes a lot of sense for Thornax because they're a little clunky. They're kind of hard to launch in anything that wasn't designed for them to be launched in. But a catapult is easy to launch them in because all it has to do is sit in the bed of a catapult, right? Now, this frame is obviously way too small to actually go over the Stradle Beast, but it gives you a general idea of what's supposed to be going on here, because as the Thornax roll down the side and ultimately roll into the catapult, you then have a lever, one on each side of the vehicle, that allows you to fire that catapult basket. Then the idea is that there'd be a seat off to one side for a character to ride on and an engine block or whatever on the other side to kind of balance things out. And obviously, if it's a propelled vehicle, just to give you an idea of some mode of propulsion. Overall, I think this is a really interesting idea because it's something I've never really seen before in fiction. That's not to say it hasn't been done, obviously. I'm not the most well-versed when it comes to fictional fantasy worlds, but it is something that I know we haven't seen at the very least from Bionicle specifically. And ultimately, I think it's a really cool idea because it not only gives you another bit of fauna that exists on Bar Magna, quite a large one as well, but it is a fauna, it is an animal that kind of makes sense within the context of this world, right? Scooping up and eating Thornax wherever they grow in bulk in large masses or whatever, maybe even tearing up like the whole vine or tree or shrub, whatever they grow on, right? I like to think that they're kind of like watermelons, kind of sprawled out on the ground, and, you know, it just takes its tusks under the sand and just rips the whole thing up and just eats it or whatever it does, right? And ultimately the Glatorians see this. Maybe it even inspired them using Thornax as a projectile. I don't know. But the Glatorians see this, see how it interacts with these things, and they're like, oh yeah, if it can collect these fruit in mass, we don't have to do it, you know? And so we can interact with that. In the Stradle car, the idea is that it's one of the original vehicles, if not the original model, you know, at least it is sort of the founding father, if you will, of the vehicles that would ultimately come out of 2009 as a concept. So I'm really happy with the idea of this. I'm going to continue working on it for a while. This is a quite large endeavor, as you can obviously tell. The legs definitely need a bit more support. Currently, every leg on it only has one socket to work with, which, while still enough to hold up the weight of the creature, I'd like it to be a little bit sturdier than that. After all that is said and done, though, I'm excited to see where this goes, to have a vehicle that interacts with Thornax in a completely different way from Thornax launchers, and yet still be able to just fire things off, to have a rider, to have a creature that ideally isn't looking like it's being like mistreated. That's the other thing too, right? Carrying the creature around, treating the creature with some kind of respect. But it's also worth noting that the head-butting feature isn't just for Thornax. Like that's a big mass of stuff that is coming at you. That would very easily take a Glatorian off of their feet or whatever the case may be. So it's not just a creature that's good at getting Thornax, but it's also a creature that's really good at just intimidating whatever it needs to. I don't know how else to put that. All right, so that's pretty much it for this video. I'm really excited for this one, and I'm excited to see it progress as time goes on. Ultimately, who knows where it's going to go or how successful it's going to be. I want something, because my brain always does this, that's just really consistent, right? I want it to pick up like 90+% of Thornax that it comes across. The hard part is because they're a rubbery material that if you try to kind of scoop under them on like carpet, it can still get caught up on carpet and roll under the thing that's trying to scoop it. It's very weird, very annoying, and it's kind of hard to work out those kinks, right? Which is why I'm not exactly sure how the tusks are going to be sorted, things like that. Ultimately, though, the idea is solid, and I think that's what matters most. So if you enjoyed the video, be sure to subscribe. It definitely helps the channel out tremendously. On top of that, let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and I will see you all in the next one. Take care.